Hey my ducks, so what makes a good koi keeper?
What makes a good koi keeper?
Makes a good koi keeper.
Makes a good koi keeper.
Makes a good koi keeper.
What makes a good koi keeper?
A good koi keeper.
Hey up my ducks, and welcome back to a freezing cold Sharpie's Pond World. It is absolutely brassic. The fish, it's winter guys, it's winter. Look at the pond. I've got ice. Ice. Fish are doing alright under there though. I've kept my air stones on, but I've moved them to the top. Keep some of the water free. Box filters all wrapped up. Pipes lagging. Why do I do all that? Well, it makes me a good koi keeper. The fish, like I say, they've been on the bottom. Swimming around sometimes. I've been moving around this morning to be fair, but normally on the bottom. I come and check on them every morning, every time after work. And why do I do that? Well, it makes me a good koi keeper. But what else can make us a good koi keeper? So, for me, what can make a good koi keeper? It can be broken down into a different number of elements really, a number of different bullet points. And we've all got our own opinions of what makes a good koi keeper. So in this video, you'll not only see my view, but you'll see some familiar faces from YouTube, people you'll know, I'm sure of it, and get their opinion on what also makes a good koi keeper. Right, so like I say, this can be broken down into a number of parts, but where do you start? So, I'm sorry, this is such a stupid question, but how often do you hear a question starting with these words? I would say that the only stupid question is the one that you don't ask, because not knowing the answer can unintentionally harm your fish. So, to become a successful koi keeper requires accumulated knowledge, backed by a certain amount of experience. So, just do your homework. We're always, any of us, no matter how experienced you are in koi, we're always learning. So if it's your first time getting into koi, it can be daunting, but arm yourself with information. It can be from magazines, plenty of magazines out there, your Koi Talk magazine for example. There's plenty of books, there's different websites, koi forums, join a koi club, social media. YouTube alone, there's a number of channels that we all watch, some great channels out there, anything from koi health to pond management to pond builds. Have a look guys.
Koi keeping is a hobby that requires many abilities. To build and maintain a koi pond, DIY experience is useful, and a basic knowledge of electrics and plumbing helps as well. To keep your fish healthy, you need to be prepared to invest some time learning about water quality and fish treatments. A good koi keeper is a person who can solve problems and has some practical skills.
Hi guys, it's Lee here from Koi Soldier channel. It's a little video for one of my mucker G's called Sharpie, you know, the bald one with an earring that looks like a naughty pirate. So what does make a good koi keeper? I suppose what makes a good koi keeper is diligence. The pond build is quite important. If you don't get the pond build correct, I think you're kind of pissing in the wind a little bit. So, and to that end of things with the pond build, most people get their first pond wrong. Sometimes their second pond wrong, and sometimes all their ponds wrong. And the key is to ask experienced people. Never be ashamed to ask experienced people questions, and if they're worth their salt, they'll take time out to help people. You've got to take everything that people take with a pinch of salt sometimes and use your own head to decipher what's good and bad information. But going back to the pond build, exactly, you've got to use your own mind to work out which is the best way for your budget, the lay of your land, i.e. your garden, what size you've got, north facing, south facing, east facing, west facing, what side, you know, what depth you want it, do you want it in ground, out of ground, So many different bits of advice, and also the pipe work and the filtration is absolutely paramount to get right, okay? Because honestly, what makes a good koi keeper is a good pond. If you make a good pond, it runs itself, do you know what I mean? So bottom drains are necessary, insulation, obviously now we've had a horrendous couple of days, it's -2 or 3 this morning. And my pond is currently sitting at 18 degrees because it's all enclosed. It's actually, I think, built pretty well. And the only reason it is built well is because I've had experience from my 2 other ponds, and I've asked lots of experts how to do it correctly. So if I ever made another pond, I'd have some changes. It's always got to evolve, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? I think another really good aspect of being a good koi keeper is being proactive but not being too hasty on things. So always keep an eye on your fish. Once you know the behaviours of your fish, you know if there's something wrong, you know, and that's normally down to a few different things, which is possibly pond water parameters. Always check your parameters. I think once you get to know your pond after a year or so, you can sit back quite comfortably and almost know how it runs like clockwork, you know. So always know your fish. Make sure you check your fish. That's why a pond window is very good in a pond. Personally, even though I've got a 3 metre window, I'm not a massive fan of windows, but I think they're an essential part of checking your livestock to make sure you can, you know, they've got no marks on them, no bumps, you've got no signs of parasitic activities, you've got no which can then lead to bacterial problems, and that's the last thing you want in your pond. I think another really good aspect of koi keeping is knowing your koi as well, you know. Bearing in mind, you know, behind me there I've got 22,500 litres of water. That's not much real estate to put things that you love swimming around in there. Now koi are swimming bits of art, okay? So if I had a house and I wanted to hang amazing pieces of artwork up and my wall was only so big, I'd want to know exactly who the artist is. I'd want to spend as much as my budget allows me to get the best fish I can to go in on that small wall, which is exactly what you've got to do in your pond. There's no point rushing out and buying a load of fish to go in there, because before you know it, you'll start loving the hobby, and then hey ho, you get into the breeders and the bloodlines and the different varieties, and before you know it, you've overstocked your pond. So that is another massive thing, is overstocking of a pond, which is going to trash your water, it's going to cause you loads and loads of problems, and it's going to stunt growth a little bit, even though it looks quite nice. And I'll be honest with you, there's quite a few fish in my pond at the moment because I've just emptied my Tozai tank. So, but again, you know, there's always an evolution of livestock going in your pond. So I think a good koi hobbyist is responsible where he offloads his koi as well. So you've loved your koi for a certain amount of time, and when that koi is ready to move on, maybe you've upped the standard of your fish, or maybe it's outgrown your pond, or maybe you just don't love it no more because it's got a foul mouth. Always be respectable where you're moving that koi onto, do you know what I mean? Because ultimately, you know, you can make its life hell or you can make its life heaven. So that's another good bullet point for being responsible with koi, taking time to help other hobbyists. I think the koi hobby is like a ladder. You've got the first run and you've got the last run, and it is truly a marathon. Okay, that ladder is pretty high, and there's always someone above you on that ladder, and there's always someone below you on that ladder. People below you will always ask you questions, and you should always look down and answer as honestly as you can and help people progressing in the hobby. And again, if you're in the middle of the ladder, it's nice to look up and ask questions from, you know, the giants of the hobby, like the dealers, really well-known hobbyists, so on and so forth. So I think that's a really important part of the hobby as well, and that makes a good hobbyist, is always spending some time to ask questions or answer questions if you've got the time, obviously, and help other people. I think the biggest thing about being a good, successful koi hobbyist is probably the pond. And now it doesn't take a lot of money to make a good pond, but it takes a lot of thought. You can make a filter out of a couple of drums which will work every bit as good as that property drum. So if you're lucky enough to be able to save up and squirrel some money away and you can afford these things, well, that's fine. But if you can't, my grandfather kept koi in the 70s, my dad kept koi in the 80s and the 90s, and they certainly didn't have that, you know what I mean? So, and I can remember my old man having some lovely fish. So, I think that's what makes a good koi hobbyist, all those bulletin points. I don't know how many there is there, but I think pond, helping people, diligence, yeah, and that's about it. Anyway, hope this is helpful. Cheers, Sharpie, you naughty pirate.
Understanding biological filtration, knowing the nitrogen cycle from ammonia to nitrites to nitrates, knowing how to deal with extreme levels in these elements. Test your water. Testing your water when your fish are telling you there is a problem. Knowing how to deal with that problem if there is one. And of course, arm yourself with an absolute decent test kit.
Okay guys, so Daniel's asked my opinion and what makes a good koi keeper. I'm definitely no expert at this, at koi keeping. I just love the hobby, I love the koi, I really enjoy it, and a great community. But personally, I think a good koi keeper is, again, you know, back to that, somebody who actually enjoys the hobby. If you're enjoying the hobby and you enjoy what you're doing, it means you'll spend a bit more time with your fish and your pond, and you don't mind doing the work on them. Also, I believe, you know, a good koi keeper needs a bit of patience. If you find an issue with your fish or your pond, it can take a bit of time to find out what the problem is. Water parameters, water checks, scrapes, checking for parasites, things like that. It can take a bit of time, and you don't always find it first time, so you have to persist at it. So I think a bit of patience is good. Also, somebody who's not afraid to ask for help and advice from someone. You know, this is a great community we have, and there's a lot of people who are, you know a lot more than I do, and you know, there's a lot of people who are prepared to help out there. You know, me personally, I'll help anybody if I can. If anyone needs help or advice, I'll try my best to help them out. And again, a good koi keeper will take advice. If I've got an issue or a problem and I ask for help and somebody recommends something, I'll always do my own research first. I don't always take that answer as gospel, but I always take all these comments on board and advice on board, and I researched it and I picked the best option from that. So I don't know, I can't really say if there is a formula for being a good koi keeper. Every pond's different, every fish is different, every koi keeper is different, different parts of the country, things like that. So there's a lot to take in, but those are just a couple of things I think, as a koi keeper myself, I think those are really good things to have. So I don't know if that's what you want, but hopefully, you know, you take something from that. So yeah, that's just my non-expert opinion on it. Catch you soon.
What makes a good koi keeper? Oh, that's $1 million question. There's so many parameters and there's so many variables in this hobby. I would say maybe the two prime thing is to source your fish correctly, because ultimately this is why you're having a pond, because of them, and get yourself a good bunch of friends around, or a good group of people around that you can learn from, discuss things with, and a good koi dealer. Keep things simple, but ultimately everything is driven by money in this world, and that will dictate how far you can go, how far you want to push things. What expensive fish you've got in your pond is not the ultimate thing. The ultimate thing is their health, and that for me, that's a good koi keeping advice. I was very lucky when I first started in this hobby that I had a tiny little pond here already when we first bought the house, and there was a problem in the pond, so I did a lot of research, and it took me 4 years for me to decide whether I wanted to go down the route of building a bigger pond, which is not my permanent pond. But I was very lucky that I could source some very good information from Gary Gatwick, from Mike Hughes, who was then at Koi, and also 3 koi keepers really inspired me, and those 3 are ANC Koi, because they gave me this thing where I knew that I wanted a very good looking pond, even if it's not a very good looking pond, but I knew that I wanted something very pretty in my pond and with some large fish. And then I had James the Koi Whisperer, and I learned so much from him about water quality and water clarity, and I knew that water clarity was one of the things that I wanted for my pond. And of course Marek Koi Pond, where I knew that this place was going to be my cave, where I can recharge my battery and just breathe and forget about everything else that's happening in the world. And of course then you've got the likes of Righty, where you can learn a lot about tinkering and a lot about filtration and a lot about everything basically. So I would say it's taking advice from people that are successful with what they do, but also that are able to give you a decent, proper advice. Advice is something that it's forever useful. No one is an expert in this hobby. No one is an expert in anything in life. It's a forever evolving hobby. Yeah, so I would say accept that you're not an expert and be prepared, because it's going to cost you a lot of money. And train your eye. Train your eye with the right people around.
Trying to prevent parasite infections. Now, I'd say we all suffer from these at some stage in our koi keeping life, but a good koi keeper will ensure that the environment is perfect for the fish. Bottom drains, pumps, filters, regularly flushed and cleaned, and ensure there's no build-up of organic debris, as this microscopic mix of dead bacteria, mucus and decaying plants will encourage parasites such as Trichodinus to thrive, and of course they will infect your koi. Spotting health problems. In the summer, especially when koi are feeding actively, a good koi keeper will notice when koi are not right. They will spot that the koi is eating less actively than the others, or as the koi crowds to the surface to feed, it slips underneath the rest without eating. In the winter, like it is now, because it's bloody freezing, the koi, due to the cold, are obviously not feeding. But a good koi keeper will monitor the temps. They'll be watching for any visible signs of ill health. A good koi keeper will be watching for repeated flicking, rubbing, jumping, which could indicate parasite infections. Obviously not so much in this weather because parasites probably non-existent as it warms up again. But if you're not comfortable with doing scrapes, a good koi keeper will definitely enlist someone who is.
Bonjour everybody, it's Dave over at Eden Koi Pond. Mr. Sharp has very kindly asked me to put a few small bits together in terms of what I think makes a good koi keeper. And I have to say this is probably one of the hardest videos I've done. And I think that stems from the fact that I've only been in this industry or this hobby for 3 or 4 years now, so I'm nowhere near the level of what you could consider a good koi keeper. So I think that's why it's been most difficult, but I will try to put a few key points together, and hopefully at some point they'll help somebody and they'll stop them from making the mistakes that I've made. I made in particular one big mistake in terms of filtration, which led to me losing probably 80% of my koi, and it was costly, but worst of all, it was heartbreaking. Knowing you've lost fish is hard enough, then knowing on top of that that it was your fault and you could have done something to avoid it is 3 million times worse. So let's get stuff like this out there. Let's stop or try to help people to not make the mistakes that some of us have already made, and in generally learn from each other. So first of all, so what I mean by the ability to take on information is being a sponge. If you come into this industry or hobby with a head like a rock, you're not willing to listen, you are going to have problems. You have issues with your pond, if you have issues with the koi, if you have issues with the water, issues with the filtration, it's very, very disheartening. And I see a lot of people weekly give up this hobby because they are so damn frustrated with problems that they've had. But there are so many good sources of information: books, internet, YouTube, social media groups. There's some great places, but what I would say to that is there's, as much as there is good information, there's some pretty poor information out there. So it's being able to filter that. No setup is the same. You know your koi. I'm pointing at mine now. You can't see the pond, but I'm pointing at it now. You know your koi, you know your pond, you know your setup better than anyone else. Like the human body, you know it better than anyone else. So it's taking that information, applying it for yourself, but most importantly, learning from it and learning to not make the same mistake again. A really important part is being preventative in terms of looking after what you've got. It's all well and good building you could build a £10 million pond. If you don't maintain it, if you don't look after it, you will soon have issues. And we have to remember, at the end of the day, I think a good term that people will agree on and use is you are keeping water, you are not keeping koi. The koi comes second. The koi won't last unless you have a good environment for them to live in. So being preventative, you see my little test kit up there, it's something I hate doing. It's one of those things you have to do. So a good koi keeper will always maintain, they will always ensure that what they've got is working sufficiently. They'll make sure that their water is of the best quality it can be. And that's checking things like nitrate, nitrite, ammonia levels, pH levels, etc. It's just making sure it's staying on top of those, your water changes, your cleaning regime. It's being proactive, it's being preventative with those. It's not sitting back and waiting for a problemo. Funnily enough, you're off to a backstep with this hobby straight away, because although koi are they're a magnificent species, they are extremely pretty, they look great, it's why we keep them, but to get them like that, they have been inbred severely. Problem with interbreeding is you then weakened immune system creeps in. So a koi, for example, versus a goldfish or a common carp, immune system wise, their ability to bounce back from illness or to heal themselves is far reduced in a decorative species. Same with dogs, cats, whatever. It's far harder in a decorative species than something like your good old crossbred shaggy dog on the street. So yeah, interesting fact for you. If so, those, like I say, you could sit back and watch your pond all you like, but it will deteriorate if not looked after. Statistically, 80% of issues with koi fish themselves stem from poor husbandry, in particular water quality. So if you want as fewer problems as you can, if you want your koi to be the best that they can be, look after your water. That's what you got to do. Giving the best that you can give That's across the board. That starts from day one. So when you're building your pond, you buy or build the best filtration you can and it doesn't have to be across the board again. So best filtration you can, doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to break the bank. There's second hand, you can DIY, you can build your own, but you're making sure it is the best for that environment, that setup that you've got. If you've got 200 fish, it's no good using filtration sufficient for 10 small goldfish, is it? It's got to be the best it can be. Same with food. Again, you don't need to do the break the bank, but you want to feed the best food that you can feed at the right time of year in the right amounts. It's no good just taking a massively fatty, cheap, crappy food, launching it in that pond 50 times a day and expecting your koi to grow. It's not going to happen. Your water is going to deteriorate, your koi won't thank you for it, and you won't win any shows. Last but not least is probably the most important one aside from husbandry. It's the ability to enjoy the hobby. So with it comes with various problems. Like I say, you can't sit there, and nobody can sit there and say it won't happen to me, because it will do at some point. You will have parasite problems, you'll have bacterial problems, you'll have problems of some description, but never let it dishearten you to the point where you want to give up. We see lots of pond closures because people aren't patient enough. You have to have the patience of a saint in this hobby, but have the patience of a saint. The rewards of sitting back on a warm summer's evening, watching those jewels swimming around that pond in all their glory and colour. Yeah, I don't think there's many hobbies that could top that. So be patient, be good to yourself, don't beat yourself up. Take your time, learn as much as you can, research as much as you can, but enjoy it and have fun. If you haven't liked this video or subscribed to Sharpie's channel, do so. He's got some great content. Have yourselves a merry Christmas. Enjoy the hobby, enjoy the cold weather. But yeah, and we'll see you hopefully over on our channel at Eden Koi Pond at some point in the future.
Hey guys, Jamie here, keeping it koi. My friend Daniel, better known as Sharpie's Pond World, has asked me to do a little video clip on what I think makes a good koi keeper. A koi keeper can be good whether they've got experience or not. It's a case of wanting to keep koi. People think keeping fish is a lazy man's pet. It ain't. I've heard lots of people in the past say keeping koi is very hard work and can be very stressful. Yes, it can be. I've certainly been through some stresses, especially if you follow my channel this year. But I've seen other people that have kept fish for 30, 40 years without any issue whatsoever. And I know a lot of people say anybody that says that is lying. Well, my nan had a pond for over 40 years. Never once needed to treat. Never once needed to take a fish out, sick fish. Never once had a problem itself in the pond. Keeping koi and keeping any pond fish is a case of wanting to keep them. If you're willing to put in the work to look after the fish, then yeah, koi keeping can be very easy. If you keep on top of your water parameters, making sure that they're spot on as much as physically possible, as humanly possible, then yeah, if the fish are happy, doesn't matter what parasite they get, they'll fight it off. Obviously, if you're bringing in bacterial issues, like I did a couple of years ago, that's slightly different. You keep the water happy, the fish will keep themselves happy. So it's not about experience, it's about wanting to keep them. If you put the time and the effort into your fish, into your pond, anyone can be a koi keeper. Not everybody knows the answer, but there is millions of people out there that will know the answer, and there's always somebody that knows more than you, and always somebody knows more than him. It's just a case of doing your homework, doing your research. I remember when I first started, many moons ago, my very first pond that I got was when I used to work on a carp farm. I had an issue with one of my carp. I didn't have koi back then, I had carp. Didn't know what it was, so I took a picture of it, took it into work, showed the boss, said, any ideas? He said, yeah. Do this, do that, do the other, jobs are good. So it's a case of wanting to learn. You spend time and effort on your pond, you won't go wrong. You build a pond, stick some fish in it, walk away, leave it just to watch it, ain't going to happen. You have to spend time and effort on your pond. It's not about money. It's not about buying the bestest drum on the planet. I mean, I've got a drum, but I still open it up once, twice a week just to make sure that it's all working, all singing, all dancing, nothing's blocked, no waste floating around in the top. I have noticed in the winter, every time I've opened the lid, it's clean as a whistle. But in the summer, yeah, I need to go in there with my little net, fish out all the floating crud and give the waste side of the drum a quick scrub with the brush, spray it with the hose pipe. So they're not maintenance free. No such thing as a maintenance free pond. Back to my original point, it's about putting the time and the effort in. That's what makes a good koi keeper. Keep your eye on your water parameters. Watch your fish. The fish will tell you if there's a problem. If you are keeping an eye on your water parameters, you shouldn't get that, but if it goes past that stage, your fish will then tell you. It's then down to you to find out what the problem is. Again, with that, as everybody says, it's all over Facebook, all over YouTube, but you start off with your water parameter checks. If one of them's out of whack, that could be the main cause. If they all seem spot on, or as they were the week before, the month before, you know, and they haven't changed, then you start with your scrapes. Check for parasites. Obviously there's 4 or 5 main parasites that koi generally get. Get yourself a microscope. That is a must. Every koi keeper needs a microscope. Yes, some dealers will take a scrape, but I've seen people on Facebook call out pond experts to do a scrape, and they charge anywhere between 40 and 100 quid just to come and do a scrape. That's without treatment. 2 of them, you've bought a microscope, and it's just a case of practicing. And there is so many YouTube videos on how to use a microscope. I think even I did one a good while back. So again, moral of the story, what makes a good koi keeper? Effort. Effort makes a good koi keeper. If you're willing to put in the effort, your pond will be happy as Larry. Keep your filters clean, keep your water parameters on check, and your koi will then look after themselves. If anything does go wrong, again, it's not sit on your hands, it's get off your backside, go and find out what the problem is. Once you've found out what the problem might be, if you don't know what to do, ask. I have never met a koi keeper that is not willing to share their knowledge. Never. I mean, I'm the chairman of the Peterborough Koi Club. Not a very big club. People ask me questions all the time, and there's a couple of people within the club that occasionally I'll go to and ask a question. It's koi keepers look after koi keepers. It's a fantastic community. Get involved. Not saying join a club, but there are plenty of clubs and pages on Facebook that you can go to for help and advice. Your local dealers, fantastic place for local advice. Effort is what makes a good koi keeper. Back to you, Sharpie.
So for me, mainly, I'd say it comes down to good pond management. Now, there's a saying that you don't just keep fish, you keep water, and it is true. You'll hear lots of koi keepers telling you that phrase. Good koi keepers pay attention to water quality. They'll check the water temperatures, they'll spot developing situations before they become a problem, make sure the filtration system is working efficiently. We'll plan ahead for changing seasons. Obviously, shallow ponds will face low oxygen in hot weather. You've got to make sure you've got enough oxygen in your system well in advance before the hot spell comes in. I've done a video myself, which I'll put the link up. So before I wrap up the video, and I freeze me absolute whatsits off, there's a number of elements that's been explained in this video, but also think about that a good koi keeper will also use medicines correctly, will know the importance of pumps, understand about quarantining the koi, will socialise with a hobbyist, observation, consider your pond location, regularly test the water, but be all and end all, just look after the welfare of your fish and learn to appreciate the joy that it brings to the hobby, and you'll be just fine. Right guys, I've got to go in. I can't feel my face. It's frozen. So if you like that video, please make sure you give it a thumbs up. I've hoped I've helped a few people out there. And if you're not subscribed to my channel, then come along, press the subscribe button. Always welcome. And I shall see you next time soon. Hopefully the weather will warm up for another video. Sharpie's Pond World. Cheers my ducks. Bye.